Hi, everyone. Today, what I'd like to do is tackle the UFO UAP disclosure subject from an angle that I haven't heard talked about that much, in fact, barely at all. To be certain, there's a growing and I would say still urgent push on the part of many people, many of you, I'm sure, for our government here in the US to give up the goods, as it were, stop the secrecy, the cover up that's likely been going on for 80 plus years. Stop the secrecy about what it is you know and perhaps have been involved in when it comes to the reality of the UFO presence and, of course, the existence of non human intelligence itself. As they say, this is a rabbit hole that goes infinitely deep, but also with many moving parts and likely many lies. Lives threatened to be destroyed for the brave few that have been willing to come forward to share some of what they know, either firsthand or through trusted sources who've been directly involved in activity surrounding the UAP story. Think David Grush, for an example. For years, I know I have wrestled with this, and that is the relentless secrecy, the deception, the cover up that never ends. But the question that I keep coming back to is, where are these mandates of secrecy really coming from?
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks.
We've long assumed that the factions of government behind the UFO cover up are motivated to keep quiet for reasons that are self serving, protecting power, money, control, all of the usual things, all the things, as they say. And yes, part of that cover up has been a big part, I would say, is about controlling the narrative, deciding what the public gets to know and what stays buried. But maybe we've been off the mark all along. Maybe the real question isn't just what they're hiding, but why. Of course, to whatever extent, some activity within these factions has been admitted, obscure as it's been. It's insisted that all inquiries will remain classified due to the threat it poses to national security. But despite what little drips of information, the limited hangout that we're getting about the reality of all of this, including but not limited to the UAP congressional hearings, as an example, that have occurred the last several years. In fact, we had one just last month. I fear we're still way off the mark as to what and who is demanding this sustained secrecy operation. Now, here's where I'm going with this, you guys. Here's the question. What if the secrecy isn't being mandated from human agencies, but rather from non human entities? So here it is. Could ET itself be behind this decades long cover up? This is a question, it's not a statement. And of course, as I ask the question, this would certainly deepen the absurdity of the UFO ET presence to anyone who still thinks this is just all BS to begin with, right? So be it. I'm going to take my chances here. Because, we are at a time when, as far as I'm concerned, all bets are off when it comes to this very, very important story. What I'm going to share with you today are a few dots that I've been thinking about, that I've been trying to connect, and I think I've managed to connect, as to who may be truly pulling the strings on this big cover up. And I think that when we view them taken all together, we may just have, you're going to have to forgive the pun, a hot smoking gun. First, I want you to hear a comment that I recently heard by News Nation reporter, you know him, Ross Coulthard. He was recently a part of a really, really good online panel discussion for the second annual Global Disclosure Day event. It was held just over a week ago on October 19th or 20th, I think. And it was hosted by the New Paradigm Institute and their initiative that they have that's called Citizens for Disclosure. Now, I have to say, this was fantastic event. It was about 4 hours long, and it featured, I'd say, a who's who of UAP researchers and advocates. That included attorney Danny Sheehan, huge advocate, been in the game a long time. Of course, historian Richard Dolan, Congressman Eric Burlison from Missouri. He's been a big advocate pushing this inside of Congress for quite some time. Chris Bledsoe and others. I'll be sure to leave a link for you if you haven't seen it. I put aside 4 hours, maybe take it in doses, but I definitely recommend you check it out. Anyway, for now, I want you to have a listen at what Ross had to say during this panel discussion, this part of the event. This will be key to where we're going here. Watch this.
think we should take seriously, and it's still a question mark in my mind, is agreements. When I interviewed David Grush, he couldn't talk in detail because of the limitations of his DOPSA, his Defence Office Pre-Publication Security Review, but he did acknowledge the existence of agreements, some kind of undertaking between representatives of planet Earth, humans, and non-human intelligence. A mind-blowing concept, but is there, and this is a residual question in my mind, is there some kind of an agreement that is restraining executive government from telling the public the truth?
I'm sure many of you have seen that now famous David Grush interview. I think that was in 2024, where he shared with Ross this idea of agreements between government entities and some groups of non-human intelligence. Now, this notion that some factions within our government have long known about ET craft and those who pilot them, the NHI, and the fact that they may have even forged agreements or treaties with non-human intelligences, that's not new. It's come up before. In fact, one of the most well-known accounts centers around President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, according to multiple sources in UFO history, lore as it were, Eisenhower was said to have met with ET, extraterrestrials, on more than one occasion. First happened in 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base, and then later, allegedly, at Holloman Air Force Base. So, little background, as the story goes, the first encounter Eisenhower had involved so-called, and I'm going to be very, very strategic about how I say this, so-called alleged Nordic beings who actually offered assistance in helping our civilization, but with the caveat that we humans would agree to dismantle our nuclear weapons program. But when that proposal was declined by our camp, another group allegedly came in, and they were described as the Greys, who were said to propose a different kind of agreement that would permit limited, and here's the key, limited human experimentation in exchange for technology. I'm going to touch on that a bit more as we move along. Now, much of this information became public through a former naval intelligence officer named William Cooper. He wrote a book in the 90s, I think it was 1991, called Behold a Pale Horse. And I actually looked it up. It's still ranking as number one bestseller on Amazon. I'll put a link for that as well. Now, Cooper claimed to have actually seen classified documents detailing these alleged treaties and secret programs. And he became one of the earliest whistleblowers to connect the dots between government secrecy, UFO recovery operations, and possible interspecies accords, something that Ross briefly touched on, what you just heard. Now, you can take this as you wish, as either literal truth or merely historical mythology. But these accounts could definitely lend credence to the conversation about who or what might really be behind the UFO cover-up. Hey, everyone. Just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this content and you want more, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell. This tells YouTube you want to see more Higher Journeys, and that helps spread the word. It's one of the best ways you can support our work. Thanks so much. Now, let's get back to the show. Now, another stunning example I want to share with you. It comes up in a book that I highly recommend, and I've talked about this before actually on several panels. And it's a book called Raechel's Eyes. It's interesting because Raechel's spelled in a very unique way. It's a book by Helen Littrell. I want to give you a little background on the impetus for the book. So Littrell, in this book, documents the college life of her daughter, who's this legally blind young woman named Marissa, which I don't think is her real name. She has a roommate who is this odd-looking young woman named Raechel. Now, Raechel is the adopted daughter. Stay with me on this. She's the adopted daughter of an Air Force officer who found himself in the middle of this classified Air Force program that reportedly stemmed from a UFO crash in the Nevada desert in the 1950s. I think it was 55 to be exact. Now, according to the account, this officer, he was a colonel at the time, connected to a covert installation that was known as Four Corners. He was assigned to oversee one of the crash survivors, who was this young female hybrid being named Raechel. By the way, Raechel was, I believe, the only occupant in this craft that was downed, that survived, and so they rescued her. So stay with me because there's a lot of moving parts here. So this officer, or colonel at this point, was given official authorization to adopt Raechel as his own daughter. The background is by doing so, providing her a cover identity. And eventually he placed her, when she got of age, into college to see if she could successfully live among humans. Now, this was literally the assignment given to this man by this covert project called at Four Corners. And by the way, this program, which was much larger than I had originally known, was deemed the Humanization Program or the Humanization Project. Now, the story, Raechel's Eyes, chronicles not just Raechel's attempt to blend in, but the colonel's role as both protector and handler, which created this bridge between the human and non-human worlds, which suggests that what we call the UFO cover-up goes a heck of a lot deeper than just concealing craft. Now, in the case of Raechel, both human and non-human entities wanted to test the effectiveness, as I briefly mentioned, of bringing a hybrid human into normal society, possibly with the intent of bringing many more human-looking hybrids to Earth and integrating them into a mainstream lifestyle. I mean, look, we've on occasion heard claims of witnesses who swear they've encountered these sorts of human-looking but kind of odd individuals. Something about them is a little different. They've been seen, I don't know, meandering throughout society in churches. In fact, it was Richard Dolan, one of the first interviews I did with him, that talked about two people that came forward to him and described running into these very strange looking individuals in a church service of all places, and having a telepathic kind of dialogue going on. They've been seen in casinos. I mean, heck, even the late remote viewer Ingo Swann, he describes a very strange account with who he believed to be an alien being or hybrid, and of all places, a grocery store, I think in Los Angeles. And that was described in his book, Penetration. So this has been looked at. I mean, this has been talked about, I should say. Is this what we're dealing with here? Is this part of the humanization project? But here's the part I want you to hear. And this gives a bit of background that somewhat corroborates the brief comment that you heard by Ross Coulthart. I'm just going to read this directly from the book Raechel's Eyes. It's a statement that was made by the lieutenant who was training this Air Force officer and 5 others back in 1955, who were being prepped to go into a variety of black op projects. So he's giving a history to the recruits, giving a history of the program that they're about to be involved in, and how some of these projects evolved. So he explains, I'm going to read this to you. He says, let's go back to Magi, M-A-J-I. This is where everything started back in the late 1940s. So Magi and Project Plato established a secret treaty with the Intergalactic Council, composed of planetary governments from several of the more progressive planets. Under the terms of the treaty, the aliens agreed to share scientific, medical, and technological information with us. In return, we agreed to keep their presence here on Earth a secret and to allow them to conduct experiments on animals and humans. And that's a quote. So he goes on to explain some of the animal mutilations that were, and frankly still are going on, were part of these experiments. So first, though, before I go any farther, I want to go back to Magi, spelled M-A-J-I, for those of you who may not know what this is. So Magi stands for Majority Agency for Joint Intelligence. This supposedly was the secret layer of government that was formed back in the 1940s by then President Truman, to control all projects allegedly dealing with alien entities. But they're also responsible for creating a stream of deliberate misinformation, the controlled narrative that was in the public, that's fed to the public constantly to this day, obviously. Now, it's been alleged that the director, and this was mentioned in the book, of Magi is also usually the director of the CIA. This is part of this true account. Now, this is something that you may have heard of, Majestic 12, and Magi is intricately connected to Majestic 12, which was known to be a group of experts that included a variety of scientific, political, and espionage experts in fields that were responsible for evaluating information gained from alien life forms. It's a lot here. And then they would make recommendations based on the info they'd gleaned. Very, very intricate operation. But the key thing I want to point out here is that this is the background information that was secretly given to these 6 young top secret Air Force recruits, including the officer who would end up adopting this hybrid alien being named Raechel and agreeing to raise her within a normal society. I read this book quite a few years ago. My gosh, maybe even 10 or more years ago. And I have to admit, it reads like a science fiction novel, but it's presented as a true story, a true account delivered by the author's Helen Littrell, who I still think is alive, still alive, I should say. She had a co-author, Jean Bilodeau. It's riveting, you guys. Go read it. I'll also have a link for that book as well. I mean, look, all of what I've described so far will absolutely seem far-fetched to many. And I do think that it's definitely important to keep an open mind as the wild possibilities that exist out there persist. We continue to hear about them. But I also advocate be as discerning as you can. Maintain a healthy dose of skepticism. I do, even in the work that I do, and as open-minded that as I am. We need to keep that in our back pocket at all times, I think. But I will say, with all of the historical evidence from hugely credible sources, you couple that with the contemporary whistleblowers that are coming out now, and I think more are going to be coming, I think it's time to start giving this a really heavy think. If you saw my show with Darryl Anka that I did last month, I believe it was, he actually went into great detail about the circumstances by which he calls open contact. This was in the after show that we did over on Patreon. He's been talking about this according to the information that he's getting directly from that whom he channels, which is Bashar. He says that open contact will happen, he maintains this, in less than 2 years, in 2027. So with all of this as a backdrop, perhaps it would behoove us to really dig our heels into this reality from as many angles as we can, including the many historical accounts and events that have been reported. Now, let's continue down this road of connecting a couple more dots as it relates to who may be really controlling this incredible secret. I want you to hear something. I sat down with Linda Moulton Howe back in, I can't believe, 2018, I think it was. And a part of the discussion we were having at the time touched on this idea of non-human intelligence having a hand in the secrecy and the lies that have been sustained for this all this time. I want you to watch this, listen to it if you're listening over on the audio podcast side. I'm going to play this clip for you right now. We'll be right back.
We've heard talk of mandates of secrecy given to certain intelligence agencies around the globe, not as a sort of secret agreement between one another, but perhaps coming from some of the non-human intelligences themselves. Comment on that if you would. Now, we're going in a direction that I had not planned, but this is what I love about whenever we get together, there's so many different directions. So let's stay on that for the moment.
A very good question, actually. I think all the way back to when I was working on that HBO project in 1983, I had a discussion with somebody who was very active military and was involved in what was going to be the interface between me and seeing that film of alleged landing down in southern New Mexico, an exchange of bodies, technology, all of that was the context with which I talked with this person. And they raised it like a hypothetical, but I took it as they are actually telling me something. Mm-hmm. And what he said was, you should consider the possibility that all of the secrecy and the policies of silence and denial isn't coming from us. It's coming because of the non-humans that we are trying to work with, communicate with, and find very difficult and confusing. They don't want us to communicate what we're doing together, and that it appears that at the biggest box level, if you said some of the beings are looking at Earth and the current model of standing up primate humanoid humans as a big experiment. And when I remember thinking about that, what he's saying to me is that the government units that have been in on the secret since Truman in World War II, for some barter system reason, what? That they would be complicit. That our fellow humans in political roles would be complicit with an alien intelligence to keep us all in the dark.
Okay, so there's a lot to parse here. But the first thing I want to say is what's interesting in terms of what she said. She was talking about this within the context of being in the presence of this high-level Navy guy, and I say Navy military guy, regarding an HBO documentary that she was working on in the mid-'80s. But from what I was able to find out, that never came to fruition. The project, for whatever reason, never got released. And so as I was thinking about that, I was wondering if that could have something to do with what this really edgy material that she was covering, particularly with what she was gleaning from this gentleman, if she just pushed too hard and tried to get some of this information in, and they were like, no longer a green light. I mean, consider who she was meeting with during this period and what he was sharing. And as far as Linda is concerned, being the consummate investigative reporter that she is, I wouldn't be surprised if she pushed to get some of this info into the documentary. And because it was too much information, because of course we were on a need-to-know basis, limited hangout, they canned it. I'm just saying, just a thought. I find that interesting. However, in keeping with what he did share with her, let's look at this. He said, and I'm going to quote here, "You should consider the possibility that all of the secrecy, the policies of silence and denial isn't coming from us. It's coming because of the non-humans we're trying to work with. They don't want us to communicate what we're doing together." The what they're doing together, to me, is where the smoking gun may possibly be. What are they doing together? The subject of human experimentation has come up before, right? It was mentioned right here. So going back to the book Raechel's Eyes, the lieutenant training these high-level recruits that he was training back in 1955, that according to the agreement, under the watch of Magi, M-A-J-I, the aliens agreed to share their science, including medical discoveries and some aspects of their technology, if we agreed to keep their presence here on Earth a secret, number one, and most importantly, to allow them to do experiments on us, on animals and humans. Experiments on us. This leads us head on into the abduction program. Not necessarily, I have to say this, it's not necessarily to be confused with ET contact. That's considered maybe less invasive and more benign. I mean, there are many contactees or experiencers who do insist, I have to put this out there, that they were not abducted as we understand it, but they're having ongoing encounters and communication with a whole host of who they describe as benevolent beings. I truly feel that's happening as well. Just want to put that out. But it does appear that something far more egregious and invasive has also been at play for many years. And this is what these sources I'm mentioning here are talking about. I want to play another clip for you from this Global Disclosure Day panel where my friend Richard Dolan brings up this very point. Listen to this.
How about knowledge of an ET presence, including abductions? So not just we've recovered their stuff, but they've gone far away. We don't know where they are, but no, they're actually here. And oh yes, we believe they take people and study them and put things inside them. That is a real possibility. Is there influence, whether directly or indirectly, that they wield within our world? Don't know. And is that influence supposed to help us or to undermine us? Like, these are legitimate questions that should be asked.
So we are asking these questions, just not nearly enough. I think we need to press for answers as much as we can. Don't you agree? I can't tell you how many individuals I've spoken to personally who shared with me, many in tears, about their own hellish, harrowing experiences of things like being taken on board craft, poked, prodded, left with strange marks that would definitely suggest some kind of surgical procedure was done on them. You have missing pregnancies. I mean, UFO researcher David Jacobs has covered this ad nauseum. You have a whole host of scenarios of people, some that I know personally, maybe some of you watching out there, who are to this day suffering from PTSD. I'll say it, PTSD, due to this experimentation. It appears that's been done on them out of force, certainly not choice. I have to pause here because every time I think about this, it's unnerving, and I think it's very real. I want to share something with you as we head toward the conclusion of this. When I was preparing the lecture that I gave at Contact in the Desert just a few months ago, this past year, back in May, where I was digging into the intergenerational component of contact, including abductions, I interviewed a slew of experiencers for my research for the lecture. But there was this one person that I interviewed that shared with me what I would call one of the most disturbing stories about some of her multiple experiences that she initially thought were dreams, but they were definitely something more going on, I would dare say. I want you to listen to this. I'm not going to share her real name. Let's call her Katie. I'm not going to share her face, but she did go on the record for my interview. And I actually don't think I used this portion of the interview. It was very sensitive information, even though she agreed to let me include it in my research. But I'm going to let you hear what she told me. And I will tell you, some of what she shared, it's a bit graphic. So I just want to give you a heads up about that beforehand, but take a listen to this.
On both times, I thought it was a dream, but I was in a place, I don't know where it was. They had me on a table, and I knew they were taking my baby, and they told me it was a boy. And all I know is when I woke up the next day and peed, this placenta came out. And that happened twice. And the first time I asked, where am I was told you are 89,000 light years away. And I didn't know where that was or how I could have got there, because even when it was happening, it's kind of like you have a dream, but you know you're dreaming, you're trying to get awake. I knew that I was supposed to be sleeping when I was there, and I didn't understand how I got there. So I thought it was a dream. And then after it happened, when I woke up, I thought it was a coincidence. But it happened again after that.
And the dream is what? Another dream that went with it?
Same thing. I was pregnant again. And it was like I woke up and I was in this place. And it was this a man, and he was like, this only take a minute. And I didn't understand what was happening, and I was telling him to, get away from me. And then I just remember I felt really calm, and I didn't know why. And it was like I was just doing what he wanted me to do, and I didn't understand it, because on the inside I didn't want to do it, but physically I was. And I just remember he had on medical attire. He had on the light. And
what did he look like?
He was a white man. He had dark hair. He had brown eyes. He just looked like an average white man, maybe 45, 50 years old. And then on that one, I remember hearing screaming somewhere else. And I was like, asking him what's going on. And then when he got done, I remember walking out of this room, and this is going to sound like the craziest thing you've ever heard. And I hope this doesn't change how you look at me. But the same thing, when I woke up, a sack came out, okay? And that's when I was like, this cannot happen twice. When I went into that other room, there was, you know, the things that the post office uses. It's like a big basket with wheels.
Mm-hmm.
To put a lot of mail in and you push it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a big basket. And it had like, this is going to sound so I've never told anyone this. It looked like vegetables in the bottom of it, like cabbage or something. And there was a child in there. He was about 4 years old. He had no hair. He had been shaved. He had no hair, no eyebrows, nothing. He couldn't see. And he was down in that thing screaming, curled up in a ball. And then something came in the room, and it had like a blanket over it. And it went over to the basket. It lifted the blanket, and I heard a bunch of screaming. And then the next thing I know, it was blood everywhere. And then I ran, and that going back to where I came from, and that doctor was standing there, and I ran into him. And he was like, you don't want to have to clean this up. Like, he was angry. You know, he says, you don't want to have to do what I do. And he pushed me out the way. And then the next thing I remember, I woke up. I thought it was a horrible dream. And then I went to pee, and a sack came out.
This is obviously someone I know personally. She was so brave to share this part of her slew of experiences with me. And believe me when I say this is not at all the only account like this I've taken from individuals I've met or I actually know personally. As I've said in the past, the idea of contact, I believe, is happening on a much broader scale with many more people involved, the contactees, who actually may not even be aware that this is happening to them. You know, this could be in the millions, if not billions. I've talked about this in several other lectures, unconscious contact being the main one. This could be a mass phenomenon. But think about this. Is this why the secret is so tightly kept? Is this why, at all costs, the details of an agreement and what's behind it can never be fully divulged? I mean, let's think about this, you guys. If, in fact, an actual agreement, an accord, a treaty was once made between clandestine government factions and non-human entities going all the way back to the 40s, and who knows how long this may have been going on or may still be going on to some extent. And if the insistence that non-human intelligence is involved cannot be discovered, what they're doing, but furthermore, if the human agency is involved, if it were found out that they basically sold us out, us as a species, the human race, for purposes of experimentation, to be used as guinea pigs, to be subjected to stealth invasion, physical invasion, if that were to be found out writ large, imagine what this kind of revolt on the part of us would look like. Y'all, it would be ugly. This is what life after disclosure, real disclosure, by the way, might look like. But I dare say it's necessary, however it happens. When you think about how adamant this policy of denial has been for so long, understanding the why behind it, it's no surprise. This would undoubtedly be the most powerful bombshell of information in all of known human history. Wouldn't you agree? If it were ever to be found out, if this is what's been going on all these years. I have to take a pause for a minute. I get worked up about this when I think about it. And after listening to so many accounts of individuals, I'm not talking about the individuals who in great number have talked about their encounters with non-human intelligence, lifelong encounters, ongoing relationships that I believe are also in existence. These are true encounters, but those what I refer to as stealth encounters happening against the will of the individual that's being experimented with. Look, either way, whatever is going to come out here, we've got to err on the side of truth, because I do believe eventually truth cannot help but to reveal itself. I'm going to give you a quote that I love. That's by Martin Luther King, who said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And so, no matter how deeply the truth is buried, it's eventually going to come out. It will eventually prevail. Look, guys, I'm going to close out for now. We're going to stay on this theme because I truly feel that this is where I believe this is where the core of the secrecy lies. I really do. Please let me know if you'd like me to continue down this road. I could see a series coming out of this. We can cover more on this part of the subject. There's a lot more to uncover, that's to be certain. So let me know in the comments below. We can do more episodes and follow this crazy trail of breadcrumbs. By the way, I actually have an invitation out to Whitley Strieber. He's actually traveling abroad right now. When I reached out to him, but he said, "Yeah, I'll come back on the show when I get back in on this side of the pond." So we're going to work on getting him over to the show to talk about this. I want to get his thoughts on this. Obviously, he's steeped in the experiential aspect of all of this, but I know he's got a thing or two to say about what we talked about today. And of course, he'll give us an update on how the visitors are doing with him these days. Also, got to bring one more thing up before we close out. We'll do it on a slightly lighter note. If you haven't noticed, we just formally launched our Higher Journeys merch store, or merch shelf, as it were, right here on YouTube. We've got some great apparel, some fun stuff, gifts, great gifts that I think you'll love. And it certainly helps to support the channel. But I'm going to show you right now one that we have that I'm taking a sip of water from. See that? Breaking news, UFOs are real. What, have you been living under a rock? There you go. We also have, by the way, t-shirts. Maybe I can put a screenshot up. T-shirts in black and white with that same saying. Breaking news. I know it's a bit irreverent and I know it's a little bold, but hey, if we're going to spark conversation, y'all, around the subject, we can't be shy about it. So go ahead and consider grabbing yourself a mug or a tea. And check out some other gear, some stuff that's not quite as fringe that we also have in the store. It's higherjourneys.store, but you can get to it right here from the merch shelf that is now formally launched. I'm so excited. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Always like to end on a high note. And by the way, there's nothing. Well, the history can be dark, but there's nothing dark about where we will end up on the other side of this if we insist on the truth. So let's continue to press for that. And in the meantime, we'll see you back here for the next episode of Higher Journeys.